So the second video that we're going to be thinking through is about the clarity and the purpose of our community groups. The clarity and the purpose of our community groups. The language that we want to use as we begin to think about this is up, in, and out. And these are really going to be like three circles to really help us think through what this looks like. Up is going to be about love of God. In is going to be about one's love for one another as Christians. And thirdly, there's going to be a love for neighbors. There could be other language that we could use to describe this, but about communion with God, community with one another, and commission to the world. But the languages of up, in, and out are very good coat pegs to hang on to. So to begin thinking through these three ideas, there are also some very dangerous ideas and idolatries as you begin to think about these. That when you have a group that is focused solely on, exclusively on, the idea of life with God, the idol can be knowledge. Look at how much I know. We are studying the Bible. Look at all our theology. And it can very well be an idol. There is another idol that is associated with our inward focus of loving one another. And that can be an idol of relationships. That if we are not factoring in our love of God or our love of neighbor, we can have an idolatry of our relationships. Now, then, as you think about the idolatry that often manifests itself with loving neighbors, it's all about service, or it's all about doing. It's not something that's being offered to God. It's not something being done in partnership with your church family, but it can be an idol of service. And so as you begin, as a community group leader, you may navigate these things, these tensions and idolatries, because all of us are going to tend to gravitate towards one or another. And it is healthy to understand that these can be idols. Now, as we also continue this, and as we move on from the idolatries of community groups, we want to understand some tensions that exist. That if we truly see these spheres as exclusive and separate and distinct from one another, where they do not connect with each other, it can be great imbalance. So if you just take the love of God and the loving of one another, the danger that you're going to walk into is that you are going to be an ingrown group. And the tragedy that actually has upon the church is that we become an ingrown church. That is the first dangerous imbalance to consider. The second dangerous imbalance is that if you just focus on loving one another and loving your neighbor, but God is not a part of it, then all you have is a social club. That is essentially the same thing as like, hey, this is my bowling group or my softball team. God is absent from it. So it's really just a bunch of relationships and social groups and social rhythms. The third dangerous imbalance, God is involved and your neighbors are involved, but your church is not involved. The tragedy, the imbalance that occurs is that there's no church and there's no commitment. See, the reality is that all these three things, having an upward focus, an inward focus, an outward focus of loving God, loving each other, and loving our neighbor, these actually come together. They are very overlap. They overlap and they are interconnected. And our community groups need to have that holistic feel to them. That when we look at our community groups, it's not just the Bible study. It's not just doing social community activities. It's not just serving our neighbors. It's all those things. And so when we have that is actually a healthy picture of the Christian life. So, for example, a new Christian, or a non-Christian, or even a mature Christian could step into a community group and they can see a holistic picture as to what a disciple of Jesus Christ is about. And that is what our community groups are for. Our community groups are to show what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. It is an invitation for us to be a disciple and to also participate with one another in those discipleship rhythms of being a follower of Jesus Christ.